In a world where we see people repeating the same sins over and over throughout history, our job is to be a beacon for the highest good. I'll say that again. In a world where we see people recommitting the same sins over and over and over and over again, our job is to be a beacon of the highest good. Very abstract, lots of big words, sort of. What in the world am I talking about? Who here has seen the musical Chicago? All right, so I have not. However, I, at least before the pandemic, am a bit of a karaoke fiend. I love it. And one of my good friends would love to sing the song where the line is, "If you'll be good to mama, she'll be good to you. If you do good for the boss will take care of you. If you don't do good for the boss, you're out of luck." And that's a polite way of putting it. To love your friends and hate your enemies. That is a very human thing to do. Who here has ever been wronged to the point where forgiveness felt impossible? Yeah, you can raise your hand. I've been there too. I even remember saying I'd rather go to hell than go to heaven if that person is going to be there.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Have you ever felt that way? No, good. Some of you have. Some of you have. Those of you who have not, awesome. I hope you never do. But that's what Jesus is angling at right now. Look around the world. Look at the news. What do you see? Do you see people loving their enemies? No. You see people loving their friends, hating their enemies, stacking up things upon things upon things to make sure that they get what they think they need, even if it means the expense of the safety and life and well-being of other people. Again, the same sins that we've committed over and over and over and over and over again throughout history. Because if we only love those that we like, only love those that are good to us, it's understandable. It makes sense. I can't fault anyone for that feeling. And there is no room for growth. There is no room for the highest good. So it's good to love your friends and hate your enemies, but it's better to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. However, one of the challenges we've been facing, even in our own country the last couple of years, is a constant confusion around how to deal with the aftershocks, the aftermath, the consequences of not living into that highest good that Jesus calls us to. We see people being pitted against one another in so many camps. We've talked about that the entire time I've been here. We see where challenges to the narratives that we were given make us bristle and be afraid to even open up to people who hold differing viewpoints than us. Even sometimes where it feels like we can't even associate with people who disagree with us on these topics because it's a compromise of our values. Anyone ever felt like that? I think everyone can raise their hands on that one. That's the squirminess of this passage, is that if we are to follow the teachings of Jesus, if we are to live into God's kingdom, we can't stay there. A friend of mine posted a meme on Facebook that I saw this morning that kind of went, for me. It's this: you will never look into the eyes of someone that God does not love. You will never look into the eyes of someone that God does not love. Now think of people who inspire you. God loves them, right? Think of the people who you wish were not even here sometimes, or were out of power, out of your life, out of influence. You didn't have to deal with them anymore. That have hurt you beyond words. Does God love them? Right.
Yes.
Does it make it any easier to love them though? No. That's where we get into a very touchy subject that today's material focuses on. The dignity of every human being is unconditional. However, that doesn't mean that that people get to be let off the hook just because God loves them. God is also a God of accountability. So, forgiveness is a touchy, difficult subject because it has more often than not been used to perpetuate abuse, to perpetuate power dynamics that should not continue. Or it's a compromise of your sense of dignity or integrity or your sense of power. That's only if you think that your dignity is tied to that person that you are in conflict with. That's important, but it's not everything. But again, forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. And forgiveness is not really for the perpetrator. It's for the victim of what has happened. Why do I say that? Because as long as your sense of center of self is tied to the wrong that person has done to you, you can never be free of what that person has done to you. Forgiveness also doesn't necessarily mean that they're off the hook. You can forgive someone for something they've done wrong, and there are consequences for that wrongness. There are plenty of people in my life that I never want to see again. I could love them, at least in the sense that I know God loves them and that they are worthy of God's love because they are God's creation. But to let them back into my life would be a dangerous, dangerous thing to do. Or I'm so hurt by them that there's nothing I can think of that would make me want to try to rebuild that relationship with them. And sometimes you don't need to. However, if it weren't for forgiveness, where would Joseph's brothers be? Dead. Or at the very least, enslaved. If Joseph had done retributive justice on his brothers, it would have boded poorly for them, and they would have kind of deserved it. I mean, what kind of brothers leave their youngest brother in a well to die, and then think, well, maybe we should just sell him into slavery? How's that? Even if he was an insufferable, know-it-all brat who was daddy's favorite son. So it doesn't matter if you're rivaling with your brothers. Don't kill them. Don't sell them into slavery. Don't even fight them. But more importantly, what would have happened to Jacob and his family and all the people that moved down with the brothers if Joseph had not forgiven? No. Innocent people would have died of starvation. We are in a time where the possibility of the availability of things like we've known it isn't necessarily secure anymore. We don't have the luxury of not caring because innocent people may die as a result of it or be in pain. So forgiveness isn't just about the intersection between the people who have the conflict. It's also about ensuring that we make room for more than just our interpersonal relationships, but think about the consequences as they affect other people. But wait a minute. That means I can't make snarky comments about people in the same way. That means I can't just judge and dismiss people who I think are stupid, or I think are misled, or I think who are dangerous, or I think that are on the wrong side of things. That also means that if they're going to follow that, they can't do that to me either. But if I don't want people making those kinds of comments about me, I can't make that about them. The highest good is a high calling. It's a hard calling. In fact, it's one of the hardest things we will ever do in our lives, to go beyond what we think is fair. Jonathan brought up a couple weeks back the notion that justice, if it was retributive, like eye for an eye, then yeah, justice is served, but there's no room for growth. The irony is that grace actually builds justice into the mix, but ultimately, compassion, even if you have to hold someone accountable, is the highest good. But it requires a sense of trusting that we don't have to mete out all the justice in the world. And we don't have to condemn everyone at face value without any room for change. And to be truly compassionate and gracious to someone, sometimes it means holding them accountable when they're allowed to get away with things they should not be able to get away with. But ultimately, it's about taking care of one another and about making sure that we strive to see God in everyone. So in a world where we're repeating the same sins that we've repeated throughout human history, when we watch the events unfolding along the Ukrainian border, when we look at the continued tensions around politics, rights, responsibilities, community-mindedness, and individual freedoms, and we look at the fact that we are facing yet another year of intense drought, it's no longer me and mine against the world. We need to reach across. We need to find ways to be beacons in the world for the kind of love that God calls us to be. As the world commits the same sins over and over and over again, our calling is to be a beacon for the highest good. And that highest good is love of God, love of neighbor, love of self, whether friend or enemy. All of God's children are sacred to God. But we need to strive to make a world where that highest good is what we can achieve together.